Hey there, card folk, Speedrobo here. Today I'm going to be talking about the development of my first, board game that I've really made for the company. And as most of my videos now, this is going to be unscripted, and it's basically just me going over how the game came to be and sharing a bunch of insight into the development of the game. And this game is Eat Putin. It's currently going through Kickstarter, and part of the reason why I'm doing this is that I think it's really important to always share what I learn when designing games with people. That's the core of what my YouTube channel is about. And as most of you know, I'm primarily a card game designer. So a board game is not in the realm of what I normally design. And there were a lot of things that I learned while working on the game, from development to playtesting to refinement. And I also want to share how I went about taking what I'm good at, really good at, which is card game design, and sort of applying it to this other medium. So to get right into it, let's talk about the game Eat Putin and how it started. So one of my good friends, someone I know personally, came to me with the idea to make a comedic board game where players take control of time-traveling dinosaurs on a mission to eat Putin and save the future. And his pitch was so funny. The concept is just absolutely wacky and hilarious. I was like, I can't say no to that. And right from the beginning, Torch, who was going to be funding this project, wanted 20% of the profits to be donated to charities helping out Ukraine. And I'm like, I'm immediately on board with everything. Immediately, right out of the gate, right? I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this right now. Because here's a chance for me to take my talents and my skill set of game design, which, let's be real, ultimately doesn't contribute a whole lot to the world, and maybe do something good with it, right? So I was like, yeah, let's give this a shot. Let's see where it goes. So that's where the game, started. And like I always talk about, when you start making a game, you can start with just, the story concept or the lore concept or the background concept and build the gameplay off of that. So Torch was like, okay, I want to make this game. What would that gameplay look like? And he immediately told me, and I completely agreed, it would be players working essentially as a team to hunt down a Putin piece on a grid-based, sort of almost chessboard-like game board. And that Putin piece would be controlled by the game itself. If you've played Sentinels of the Multiverse, it's kind of similar in concept to that, where players each play as a superhero, and the supervillain is actually played by the game itself. And I always think that that sort of game is really fun. And in Eat Putin, players do compete to see who's the first to eat Putin. But you can also just view it as a cooperative experience, right? The fact that it can be played as a competition or as co-op, I think is also something that's really cool. And I think that that's a element that that's inherent to games that have a sort of AI-controlled element that I always really appreciate. And so with this sort of development concept, immediately we kind of knew what the rough gameplay was going to be and the story was going to be. And so from there, it was pretty easy. Now we need to figure out how players are going to move and how Putin's going to move. And right out of the gate, I was like, okay, well, I want it to be card-based, for sure, right? With dice, you can do that for movement, but when you roll dice, you're either going to need specialty dice made, which can be kind of expensive at times, especially if you do what my company does, which is small-scale print-to-order. Or you can do cards, and with cards, you can get a lot of movement and special effects applied. The deck can get shuffled up, and one element with a card deck is that if players know what's in the deck, and they see a certain number of options coming up, they know, oh, hey, that, if they've seen all of one card be drawn from the Putin deck, they know he's not going to move in that direction again. And that's an element of skill and game knowledge that I think is fun. I genuinely like that. I like cards a lot, as you know. So I definitely wanted to go with that for Putin's movement. And for the players, I decided to play into my strengths. I'm really good at card design and faction design and making different decks and archetypes feel unique from each other and giving distinct playstyles to archetypes and factions. And so I was like, well, cool, let's do that. Originally I had the players all draw from the same central deck, which is a very board game concept. But I was actually encouraged by Torch to play into my strengths and make each faction have their own unique deck. And that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to, and this is one thing that I was talking about, of when you are transitioning from one genre to another, think about ways that you can still utilize your strengths from the previous genre of game that you worked on. And this is a really good example of that. Since I am a card game designer and I am used to designing unique decks and unique archetypes in games, why not do that again, even though I'm going into a board game? Together the initial concept and the initial prototype, and we moved into playtesting after that. So when you first playtest your game, you need to completely acknowledge that you're going to change a lot about it. Do not get stuck and don't get stubborn on your ideas and concepts. Be completely open to changing huge elements of it. And there are a lot of elements in playtesting that were very tricky to get right, and the Stegosauruses were one of them. And that's something that I haven't brought up yet, is Putin actually has some dinosaur allies of his own that move around and prevent player dinosaurs from moving through them, and these are the Stegosauruses. And what was tricky is they are both like obstructions for both players and Putin. They're walls on the game field that players themselves can affect, and that can do a lot of things. But one big thing that was tricky about it is that they needed to be really easy to understand, so that it wouldn't result in like the dreaded legal phase in a board game where players have to like pause everything and take out the rule book and read it and debate on how it works. That's just not fun. So originally in the Putin deck, I only had one card that affected the Stegosauruses at all, and that was just to teleport all the Stegosauruses near Putin. And that wasn't like super fun, because Putin couldn't move through the Stegosauruses either. So when he played that card, basically he just stopped moving for the game until one person, you know, played a card from their deck that allowed them to move Stegosauruses, and then they just walked in and ate him. So then I was like, okay, let's have Putin move through the Stegosauruses. But then they didn't really do a good job of protecting Putin at all. So this is what I'm talking about when it comes to playtesting, and don't be afraid to like change the cards that you've made. Because I actually found a compromise that I'm pretty happy with. About half of Putin's movement cards specifically say that he can move through his Stegosauruses, and half don't let him do that. I feel like that's pretty much the answer to that. And the player cards initially that I designed felt kind of weak and unspecial and unflavorful. So pretty much all of the player cards got buffed throughout the course of the game, and a lot of them saw even more powerful effects. Previously, the global move card only let you move one of your dinosaurs or a Stegosaurus 2 spaces, and now it lets you move a dinosaur and a Stegosaurus, which allows you to play around with the Stegosaurus pieces while still keeping your pieces active, and that just wound up making the game a lot more fun. The next thing that I ran into with the player cards and the player pieces, and this is another thing that I think is really important to highlight during the development of Eat Putin, is that bring a lot of concepts into your game and then sort of shave down to the best ones, right? Or build up ones that your playtesters gravitate towards. And a good example of that is that I had cards for one faction that revolved around their alpha piece, and this was for the Raptor faction. So every faction had a piece that had an alpha symbol at the top, which was like the leader of the pack, the alpha of the pack, right? the dinosaur pack, because everybody has 3 dinosaur pieces that they can move. And the Raptors had cards that specifically manipulated the alpha and did powerful things when it targeted the alpha piece. And the other factions didn't. And players were like, oh, we want the alpha to do more stuff. I gave every faction a card that says, do a thing. If you did the thing with your alpha, make it better, or do another thing, right? And then again, just makes the game more fun. It makes the game more strategic as well, because you have to think like, oh, hey, do I want to move this minor piece, or do I want to move my alpha now? Like, what's going to happen? Where's this going? And what am I going to do? And those kinds of decisions, having your players make those kinds of decisions is what a game is all about, right? Like, that's how you make a game fun. You don't want to overwhelm your players, but you want to give your players simple decisions that are fast to figure out, but interesting to think about, right? That's what you want in a party board game. You want it to still move quickly, but you want players to feel like they're making interesting decisions. So the last thing I want to talk about today is one of the big things that I did not anticipate coming from the realm of CCGs when it came to this board game, and that was playing the game with 2 players versus playing the game with 4 players. The game, even though I didn't realize it, was designed and balanced around it having all 4 players playing at the same time. This would mean that each playstyle, single, rush, team combo, player control, and Putin control would all be featured, right? Those are the 4 playstyles, and they would all be featured in a 4-player game. Each player kept the others in check as both control and rushdown battled it out. 4-player games, like even from the earliest versions of the game that had a lot of problems, were always super fun and dynamic. The game started to break down when it was taken to 2-player. Originally, the 2-player game worked exactly the same as 4 players. Each player would choose a dinosaur team and deploy their 3 pieces. And like, I saw issues almost immediately with just 2 players. Because if one player chose a control team and the other player chose an aggressive one, the non-control player would just get bullied the whole game. With no other players to spread out the abuse, it was just like it's just inherent to the game, right? Like, you don't have anybody else to target if you're the control player, so you just dogpile your opponent. And if both players chose an aggressive team, like, there was nothing to stop you from just zipping in and grabbing him. So it became luck of the draw onto where Putin would move and who would get the win. And that's, like, not super fun. So the first thing that I tried to fix this, and again, like, don't be afraid to mess around with your core rules. If you see something not working, like, mess around with stuff and try stuff, right? Because the worst thing that happens is that you just go back to what you had previously. So never be afraid to experiment. So the first thing I tried was having Putin draw 2 cards at the end of the turn, which helped somewhat, but it didn't, like, solve the player archetype imbalance. So how we actually did it was that in a 2-player game, players choose and control 2 dinosaur teams, which gives the exact same balance as a 4-player game with all 4 playstyles being represented and Putin moving the correct amount. This is one thing that I'm still working on as the game gets developed, so like, I'll keep you updated. But so far, so good, and that's working out pretty well. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to share on the development of Eat Putin thus far. If you have any questions, hit me up. Drop comments down below. Our Kickstarter still has about a cool week left, so check it out. The description's down there. Like I said, 20% of the profits get donated to charities helping out Ukraine. You know, I'm proud of how first board games turned out. I'm really proud of the work our amazing artist did. So definitely go check out Aneta Sacharshipa. She's the artist who did all of the artwork for the game. Absolutely knocked it out of the park. She and I have been good friends for a long time, been working together on projects for a long time, and her work has always been top-notch, and Eat Putin's been no exception. So, link to her socials down below as well. Let her know you came from me, and say hi. Subscribe for more, like, developer diaries, developer commentary on my future games. I'm going to keep posting them here. And, yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. I've been Speedrobo, and I'll see you next time.